Mr. Chairman, and to the Credentials Committee. My name is Mrs. Fannie Lou Hamer, and I live at 626 East Lafayette Street, Roosevelt, Mississippi, Sunflower County, the home of Senator James O. Eastland and Senator Stennis. It was the 31st of August in 1962 that 18 of us traveled 26 miles to the county courthouse in Indianola to try to register to become first-class citizens. We was met in Indianola by policemen, highway patrolmen, and they only allowed 2 of us in to take the literacy test at the time. After we had taken this test and started back to Roosevelt, we was held up by the city police and the state highway patrolmen and carried back to Indianola, where the bus driver was charged that day with driving a bus the wrong color. After we paid the fine among us, we continued on to Roosevelt, and Reverend Jeff Sonny carried me 4 miles in the rural area where I had worked as a timekeeper and sharecropper for 18 years. I was met there by my children that told me the plantation owner was angry because I had gone down, tried to register. After they told me, my husband came and said the plantation owner was raising Cain because I had tried to register. And before he quit talking, the plantation owner came and said, Fannie Lou, do you know, did Pap tell you what I said? And I said, yes, sir. He said, well, I mean that if you don't go down and withdraw your registration, you will have to leave. Said, then if you go down and withdraw, that you still might have to go because we're not ready for that in Mississippi. And I addressed him and told him that I didn't try to register for you. I tried to register for myself. I had to leave that same night. On the 10th of September, 1962, 16 bullets was fired into the home of Mr. and Mrs. Robert Tucker for me. That same night, 2 girls were shot in Roosevelt, Mississippi. Also, Mr. Joe McDonald's house was shot in.
Good morning, everyone. How are you doing today? Good day and welcome to the Fannie Lou Hamer Institute Action for Jackson. We are truly excited that you're joining us from all over the world today for a spirited discussion about what's going on in Jackson and how we can be a part and take action today and make changes and improve the community and stuff around us. We greatly appreciate you all being here, and on with our program. Next, we'll have Akili. Thank you.
And thank you, Erica. And that was Erica Ryan, who's a coordinator here and on the steering committee. I also want to welcome people. And every time I hear that story that Mrs. Hamer tells about her doing a simple thing that many of us take for granted, and that's registering to vote, and what happened to her. She was evicted. The place where she wound up being was shot into. Other people were shot for doing something that many of us just assume everybody can do. And I often think to myself, what would I do if I had gone through that? What would happen? How would I keep going? And I also think about the fact that she was beaten badly, and it contributed, many of us believe it contributed to her early death. And I often ask myself, could I have done that? Could I have kept going? Could I have stayed focused? Could I have, overcome and continued? And I'd like to think I could, but I really don't know. And so that's why the Fannie Lou Hamer Institute was started. First, to uplift the name of Mrs. Fannie Lou Hamer, because we all need to remember that name, know that name, and share that name. Secondly, to uplift what she did, to uplift her leadership, to uplift her capacity, and to uplift her legacy. And then finally, to make sure that we try to live in the path that she led and cut for us in terms of voter engagement, voter education, and human rights struggles. So with that, I want to welcome you all and thank you all for joining us. And I want to introduce our two special guests from Jackson, Mississippi, and say happy birthday to one of them, Makani Themba, who has been a longtime friend of mine for many years, and who is a person who is the executive director and founder of Higher Ground Strategies, a author, a strategist, and an organizer, and someone who I have counted on for years to help me, to support me, and to advance the work that I and others have done. And then the next person I want to introduce, who I met through Makani when I went to Jackson, is Rukia Lumumba. Rukia is Rukia, are you still practicing law?
No, we provide legal support, but
All
I
right.
myself don't go into the courtroom.
She is the executive director of the People's Advocacy Institute, a longtime leader, national leader. And one of the things that I was impressed that you went to South Africa and helped in and supported and participated in their electoral and democratic process. Rukia is also in Jackson and you were the campaign director for the mayor, the current mayor of Jackson, Mississippi. So with that, I want to, and I was trying to remember you all's bios, but I may have missed some. So I want to thank you. And I want to start out by asking, what is happening? And I'm going to ask this to you, Rukia. And then Makani, I'm going to come around to you to talk about what can be done. But Rukia, give us an example of what's happening and why it's happening. And here's what many of us have, and I saw a tweet the other day that held up Jackson as an example of democratic failure and what's happening there. So give us, if you would, some background and history of why we are here and then what's happening now.
So one, thank you for having us. Very excited to be on. It's always an honor to be on with you. And of course, Makani, who is literally one of our greatest advisors and guides in Mississippi. We're so blessed to have her. And so happy birthday on this new year, your year around the sun. We are very grateful for you and your genius and your leadership. But anyway, I know this is not about Makani, although we can celebrate her over and over again, and I would love to. Thanks everyone for joining. What is happening in Jackson has been happening for decades. What we see is not a failure of local democracy, but it's a failure of what I would consider American democracy. And so when I say local, I mean in Jackson, we're trying a new path. We're trying to create what we call co-governance, where decisions are made by the people and implemented by representatives that are in elected office. And so what you see happening in Jackson in particular is that the movement of the people rising to take care of ourselves and guiding our government to do that. And so what you've seen are years of neglect by our state government, a very rare old water system that has received barely any state and federal funding or support, a system that has been maintained at the burden and backs of residents of Jackson and administration after administration after administration since 1997 when we had our first Black administration. What you've seen is administrations and residents trying to take up the burden of fixing this old rare system, putting Band-Aids on open wounds that need a lot more than a Band-Aid, need surgery. We've seen the state consistently, despite ongoing requests for millions of dollars to fix this growing problem, deny funding over and over and over again. As early as last year in 2021, when we went nearly 6 weeks without water. The state not only, through the Governor Tate Reeves, not only failed to provide any financial relief, but also failed to even implement a state of emergency until 3 weeks after we had already been without water. And so what we see is a willful neglect. We see a divestment in Jackson, in the same way we see a divestment in Black-led cities across America. We see a irresponsibility and moral neglect of infrastructure, not only in Jackson, but across the state, water infrastructure systems and other infrastructures that are critical to the wellness of people and the mobility of people are being neglected all across Mississippi, while state legislators and state government officials are giving money to folks like Brett Favre and so many others, using taxpayer dollars to actually care for their own personal needs, but not thinking about the needs of the people. So what we see is racism, classism, white supremacy at its best. But Jackson is just an example of that and of happening all across America.
Thank you. Thank you, Rukia. One of the things that I learned when I've been to Jackson is the effort by the state to constantly undermine. I mean, I learned about that from you all, to undermine the progress that the people there want to make. And Makani, I want to turn to you for a minute because you worked in the mayor's office at one time. How is it that you have this Black community, a progressive mayor that is doing good things, but yet and one of the things you all told me about is that some years ago there was a tax to try to repair the potholes, and that the state tried to take it away from you. Remind me of that story and tell me about how local government can operate when you have a state that's undermining everything you do. And happy birthday.
Thank you. And thank you, family. I feel very, very celebrated. Thank you. First of all, before I go there, I want to just celebrate and acknowledge Rukia, who in her leadership, standing in her family legacy, but even beyond that, has made such a difference. People's Advocacy Institute, y'all have no idea. I mean, how much they hold together. And there's been a crew of people, the Mississippi Rapid Response Coalition, who have been at this basically every day since the pandemic. I don't know how folks get up early and keep staying up late. And I've learned more about pallet jacks and things that I had no idea about. And I'm so grateful to Rukia and Nishambi and Danielle and other folks, too many to name. And so I feel like I want to definitely acknowledge that. And the leadership, not only in terms of responding, even though response is in the name, but also in leading and innovating and thinking through what's next. And in fact, many folks know that it was Rukia's father, the first Mayor Lumumba, who, my comrade and friend as well, was literally walking around with a rusty, I can watch my language, I'm just going to say a rusty pipe, corroded pipe, right? And working with the residents of Jackson to help folks understand the relationship between the infrastructure and the problems that they were facing and the need to come together. And I know there's folks like Reverend Pinckney on this call who know all about that and who know all about what it means to walk through these kinds of infrastructure issues and to have the people fighting back and then to have a state treat you like you don't even live there, like you're not even paying taxes, like you're not even a resident. And so I know there's other warriors on the call like that, but I had to do a special shout out to Reverend Pinckney because I know that you were there before we were there. Yes. And I got to say that. So I appreciate that, sir. Appreciate that very much. And so, so that, Mayor Lumumba, the first Mayor Lumumba went around with other organizers, Malcolm X grassroots movement, held that down. The founding of the People's Assemblies was really a foundation for these conversations to engage people in the business, right? As Rukia said, the co-governing. That tax passed by over 90%. Like, can you imagine people voting to tax themselves? just take that for a minute, right? And then that was a source of revenue. But even if all of that money was able to come back to the city, which it didn't, because it was a fight and not all of it, the state allowed to come back to the city, it was really still not enough to do the kind of infrastructure repairs. And what I know that sometimes we refer to it as neglect, and Mississippi isn't the only state like this, but the truth of the matter is Mississippi, like many states, their whole business model as America is one of extraction. It's not even neglect. They extract our labor, right? First it was slavery, and then of course, low wage labor. They do a lot to depress the wages. And Jackson, as a Black city, like many of the Black towns, folks literally think of our communities as places where they go get things, but they're not supposed to invest. And so this extraction model that happens not only in Black communities and brown communities, because Laredo, Texas, which is the largest Latinx population in the country outside of Puerto Rico, and I don't consider Puerto Rico the US, but for those people who do, Laredo, Texas is the largest population. Same exact issues with the water, except it's not on television, it's not on the news. And so we've been really fortunate that we have a mayor that people like to listen to and follow, and that he has that charisma that's been able to draw attention to the issue. But there are literally thousands of Jacksons around the country. Yeah. And so what it's meant, I think for many of us, as we are doing this organizing work, and again, Reverend Pinckney was ahead of us in this, is folks joining nationally, figuring out what can we do, and looking at the fact that these states are allowed all kinds of discretion around how they make investments. And so that back in the 70s, 79 was the last year, cities used to have revenue sharing. And so that revenue sharing was that where cities would get a share of the federal taxes that those cities paid, and those came directly to the cities. Under Reagan, with this so-called states' rights, which is just another word for white people taking stuff that don't belong to them. I'm not even call it supremacy because they are not supreme. And so that, in fact, my friend Hunter Adams, who some of y'all know, call it white sociopathy. And I love that term. I think it's much better. And the last thing I'll say is about it is just that after revenue sharing was ended and everything had to come through the states for cities, which they did on purpose because cities had so many people of color to kind of undermine the power of cities. And so when that happened, it created a situation where cities were not accountable to any equity around how they made those investments. And so then we have a situation where if you imagine a state as a house, it's like you have a bomb living room, right? And everything is all perfect, but every year they put money into changing the floor and painting, even though it's already great. And then you got a bathroom where the toilet's turned up and is spewing, but they're like, we don't go in there, so it doesn't really matter. And so without any kind of federal intervention, and I think about the spirit of Fannie Lou Hamer in this, is that Mississippi could not even come close, even though it still has work to do around its voting rights without federal intervention. And it's going to be the same for water rights all over the country. There has got to be federal intervention for us to have access to our rights, to hold the states, all the states, including Mississippi, accountable to funding where the need is as opposed to where the greed is.
Thank you, Makani. And I want to welcome some good friends of mine. First, I want to welcome Iranke from Lagos because they are fighting against the privatization of water in Lagos. I want to welcome Naira Sharif from Flint Rising, and I want to welcome hello, Iranke. I want to welcome from Benton Harbor, which is also having a water problem, Reverend Pinckney and Mary Alice. And part of what we wanted to do was focus on Jackson, but also connect the dots that's happening both nationally and internationally with people who are struggling for water as a human right. And so I want to welcome them and thank them for joining us. and we're going to get around the, I want to find out what's been happening in Flint in a minute, and then Iranke, I'm going to ask you. But before we do that, I want to come back to you, Rukia. Tell us about Mississippi, the Mississippi Rapid Response Coalition. When did it get started? What is it doing? And how we can support and participate?
Rapid Response Coalition is a coalition made up of over 30 organizations. It is led by a core group called the People's Advocacy Institute, One Voice Mississippi, Mississippi Poor People's Campaign, the Jackson People's Assembly, the Immigrant Alliance for Justice and Equity. I'm going to name them because I think it's important. Also, Alternate Roots, Mississippi Votes, Strong Arms of Mississippi, Operation Good, Mississippi Black Women's Roundtable. We have Southern Poverty Law Center, and as I mentioned before, a number of other groups. And I named those core groups because those are the core groups that are currently operating to help lead water relief efforts here in Jackson. But it's a statewide coalition. It got started in 2020, a few days or about a little more than a few days before the COVID shutdown during the pandemic. Where we all came together at that time. We were calling ourselves the Community COVID Response Team. And we were going door to door distributing relief, food, hot meals, water, as well as supplies to keep people safe. And we did that for a whole year. And then in 2021, when we were hit by the winter storm, what some are calling an Arctic blast across the South, including in Jackson, Mississippi, and in many rural communities in Mississippi, 2 days after that storm, 2 days after people were without lights, without heat, without water, we went into action to provide relief to residents across the state. And so our coalition spans across the state. We have members across the state, and we recognize that our efforts are long-term. This isn't just about, as Makani indicated, about rapid response. We're looking at how do we develop sustainable systems, right? Where we can respond in times of crisis, but where we can also take care of ourselves even and be more sustainable when there is no crisis. What does it mean to actually have well systems that consistently work? What does it mean to have generators in case we all ever need it? What does it mean to be able to test our own water and become our own water technicians? What does it mean to be able to have secure filtration systems that are community-based and community-led and provided by community members, while at the same time demanding control over the resources that the state has that are ours in the first place? And so really expanding our decision-making power to actually control the resources that are ours, that the state is currently holding.
And tell us what's happening now on the ground in Mississippi. What's going on right now in Jackson?
Yeah, well, right now, as we speak at this very moment, we have 4 distribution sites happening right now. Number of distribution sites. We have about 6 distribution sites that are always active. And those are across the city in the many different areas of town. So from South Jackson to Northwest Jackson to Northeast Jackson. For those of you who have been to Jackson, you know that we're a little spread out. And so we have different areas to West Jackson where we provide water distribution sites where people can come and pick up water. But we also know that we have a lot of folks who are living with vulnerabilities that cannot get to the water distribution sites. We have elders who are no longer driving. And so we also do door-to-door distribution of water. In addition to that, we are moving to educate our folks on this timeline through the leadership of Makani, and our folks, Wendy at Alternate Roots, have developed, and Nat Afia have developed a really comprehensive timeline. Can't forget Diane, of how we got here, starting from as far back as 1970 and before, all the way up to present day, and the number of plans that have been drafted and presented to both state and federal officials asking for help to actually fix this issue. And so we're educating our people about that, but also creating a process by which we're finding out what are people really needing and what are their priorities right now and what are their experiences with water. So if we're engaging in what we call wellness checks, These wellness checks were developed. It's a process that was developed by the amazing, brilliant mind of Valencia Gunder with the Smile Trust and the Black Hive of the Movement for Black Lives. She helped us last year when we called over 7,000 residents in Jackson, cold calling, just finding out, what do you need? What is your experience? How can we get to you? And so we're enacting our wellness checks again this year to make sure that we're reaching as many people as we possibly can and being led by what their needs are. Oh, and then tomorrow, no, what's today? Saturday, Monday, we have on September 26th, we have a march with the Mississippi Poor People's Campaign. We're national partners, and folks from across the state are coming to Jackson to march on Jackson, to rally on Jackson, rallying right up to the governor's mansion to demand our right to clean water and to demand to keep it public and to keep it Jackson led. We have the authority over our water as residents of Jackson. Our municipality has authority, not the governor, and that's the way we want to keep it.
Thank you, Rukia. And Naira, I'm going to come to you in a minute, because this reminds me of when I was in Flint. The fire stations that were turned into distribution centers. But before I do that, Makani, what's happening on the ground politically? I know you all have just elected people, a senator. Where is the federal government in this? What's happening? Is the Biden administration doing anything? Have they stepped in? Do you know about anything that's happening on the ground?
Well, let me just say this. My leader is Rukia Lumumba, and so what I'm about to say, I'm like, Rukia, jump in. This is what I know, but Rukia is always the one close to all things, all the time. So we had a very odd visit by EPA. I think that's a good word. Is that a good adjective to call it? We've been having conversations with different members of the staff at EPA that have been, I must say, interesting. So I think it's important to say that, one, because of the politics of states' rights, there's a dance, but there's currently an effort by the federal government to look at a way to get money directly to Jackson, because even the ARPA funds and other infrastructure funds, the state made additional hoops just for Jackson. Let me just say that, just for Jackson, to be able to get access to federal funds in the state. So I think thanks to all of the press and the organizing and the work on the ground, that it's finally reached Washington, that what they have, I heard that, thank you, that that the system that they've set up doesn't work. So what has happened with the federal response is now people are now instead of saying, well, we're going to keep putting money and we're going to give it to this same, and I must just say, racist governor and racist administration and hope that the money comes down, when now people are like, well, maybe that's not going to work. I think with the EPA, Jackson's been under a consent decree since 2012 with the EPA, and it had 11 years, right? So 2023 is the year. It has 11 years to come into compliance. And I think, it's good to have an EPA that monitors what's happening, but how important is it to actually have the resources to fix a thing, right? So I think the answer is, yes, there's some movement on the federal side finally, that I personally, I'm not going to speak for the coalition because, but I would say personally, I think the EPA could have done a whole lot more than it has done. And I have seen it do more for more affluent communities to step in. Like, for example, I saw in DC when we had the water issue there with the chlorine dumping, Northwest DC got filters from the EPA, not Southeast, not Northeast, but Northwest DC got filters from the EPA. So the EPA has, and here we are as a coalition trying to raise money and do research on filters. And all the EPA has to say is, well, you all need some NSF 53 filters. I'm like, yo, give it to us. Why would you have 11 years? We've been on a consent decree, and 11 years you write these reports and everybody gets a note in their water bill each quarter about don't mix this water with your baby formula because you could hurt your baby and all these things. It's that serious. It's been that serious. The federal government could step in without dealing with the states at all. They do not have to ask the governor of the white people of Mississippi if they need to send, if they can send filters. They could do that right now. So I think that for all of us, as we're thinking about like, how do we work together? What are our demands as we move into Monday's march led by the Poor People's Campaign and the coalition? It seems like there are things that the federal government can do right now. Everybody in Jackson could have NSF 53 filters right now. They could have filtration right now. And there are two reasons that I know, Akili, you know a lot about this because you've been organizing around this issue of water for a long time, not just in terms of safe drinking water, but around also how the soda companies also disrupt the ability for people to have access to clean water. And that part of the challenge is why so many schools don't have good water fountains, is that literally in addition to all of the racism that we face from the state, there's also this push from the beverage companies not to fix water fountains, not to have public safe drinking water, because, and they say this in their own documents, that they're trying to get full stomach share of sort of what they call stomach share. And so they would rather have people buy water. And so it seems like there's a battle that we're engaging in, not just the federal government, but how the federal government subsidizes these industries and how it has an impact on our access.
Good. Thank you. And I'm seeing, first of all, I've got some very good and dear friends on this call. And one of them I met, I guess it's almost 6 years ago now, when I went to Flint, because I'm a project coordinator with corporate accountability, and I see many of my co-workers and colleagues on this call too. But we went to Flint to see what was happening, because one of the things that corporate accountability is fighting is the privatization of water, both nationally and internationally. And so we went to Flint, and one of the people that we met and worked with in Flint was Naira Sharif, who is a longtime organizer and an activist in Flint, and who we connected with, and she showed us around. She connected us to people. And we've been working with Flint Rising now going on, what, 5 years? Naira, how much of this, Naira, you see happening in Jackson is kind of jogging memories of what happened in Flint, and kind of bring us up to date on what's happening in Flint?
Yeah, I would say like this is triggering as far as like PTSD, because this is exactly, like the same stuff that was happening in Flint. Like our water crisis like really began through austerity politics and the city of Flint going under state receivership, and because they were making decisions based in money and just like the other, I would say like larger systemic and racist policies around water infrastructure funding, like we had these decisions being made. And, like the fact that the city of Flint, like all of the things that we won was through continued community advocacy and a protracted struggle. So having water distribution sites throughout the community and not managed by the National Guard, having residents being the ones that was actually receiving those jobs to distribute water, actually having people going door to door, and for us to have spaces that wasn't like surveilled or policed, like that all happened like through community advocacy. And I would just say like, in the ways that matter, like nothing much has changed, like for Flint. Like we still have 3 water distribution sites that are managed by like 3 churches that folks like, I would say like they're they're like once a week distribution. So there's 3 different sites, so 3 days a week in total. And people are like lining up like for hours to receive water and to get food, like lead mitigating foods. So, and we still have like the water affordability problems. We still have the water infrastructure problems. And just wanted to kind of lift up and kind of tie in a bow, like what some of the previous speakers have said, you know, like this is part of a larger issue. Like you should not be normalizing boiling water, boil water advisories, that's something that is normal, because it's something that's definitely not normal. And it has been normalized in Black communities. And one of the other things that should not be normalized is the fact that, you know, like water shutoffs being a thing, you know, because like we live in this society where nobody should have their water shut off due to the inability to pay. And, you know, similar to Jackson, what happened in Flint, because we have like, you know, the Stafford Act, which is like this federal policy that that regulates disaster declarations, because of that, you know, what happened in Flint and what happened in Jackson and what's happening in other communities, they're not calling it a disaster declaration, because one, anything that happens as a result of climate change is not a disaster declaration currently. So they're just declarations of emergency. And what that means is that state agencies, like these racist ass state agencies that have created and perpetuated and covered up these problems, they're in charge of your recovery. So that's like, you got raped, and the person who's the lawyer is supposed to be like pulling forth your case was your rapist. And the judge and the jury were witnesses to your rape. And it's just like absolutely disgusting that you have like agencies and these people who are responsible for, you know, like your continued oppression, supposed to be the ones that are managing your journey to the promised land.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. And one of the things I want to uplift and acknowledge the work that you and others with Flint Rising have been doing in terms of making sure, one, the people are safe, two, that you advance your demands, and three, that your continued advocacy, even though Flint is no longer on the front page anymore, now it's being replaced by Jackson, and soon, in a minute, I'm going to go to your neighbor up in Benton Harbor, and then I'm going to come around to Lagos. But what is happening now? I know that there was a court case that you all were involved in, and because you wanted accountability. So tell us a little bit about what's happening with the court case.
Well, we have several court cases. So there are the civil court cases. So we have one with the state of Michigan and the city of Flint, of like the civil court cases as far as the responsibility for the water crisis. We have a few criminal cases for folks when that has actually gone back to starting from scratch, because the Michigan Supreme Court said that like the way for Black and brown people, which is a one-man grand jury, that's not good enough for like wealthy white people, people who were former governors and former state agency heads. So that type of justice was not good enough, even though that's something that is very common as Black people moving through the criminal justice system. And then we also have a case that just had a mistrial with some of the I would say engineering firms, and their lack of sounding the alarm of the Flint water crisis, and that was like Veolia and Groenland. So Veolia is the largest kind of water privatization firm in the globe, and they had received a contract to actually like look at why we were having all of these the total trihalometane, which is a chlorination byproduct. So we had these Safe Drinking Water Act violations, and they didn't sound the alarm that, you know, this type of treatment or lack of treatment could also lift up the lead, because we had this caustic water that was untreated flowing through our taps. And, you know, like Veolia spent like millions of dollars to try to poison the jury pool, and like had like these targeted Google ads. So they were like, you know, pulling out all the stops to try to like put forth that they were not responsible for what happened in Flint. And so that is still kind of like ongoing of like whether or not they're going to be tried for being held accountable for their lack of action in Flint.
Well, and that's something that certainly we have been monitoring and watching at Corporate Accountability, along with wanting to support what you all are doing on the ground. I'm going to go to your neighbor up in Benton Harbor, Reverend Pinckney, who, by the way, has a long history of social activism, and who took that history, took that commitment, and wound up being arrested. And you did almost a year, basically for challenging the on the ground decisions by people. And then they charge you. So talk a little bit about what you were charged with, and then talk about what's happening with the water in Benton Harbor.
Well, first I'm gonna start off by saying, hey, it's an honor to be here today, and I really appreciate all of you guys. And you know, whatever I need to do to help the people in Jackson, I will. And that's my girl. She's part of my team, and I have a lot of love and respect for her. But here's what I'm going to say. In 2005, I did a recall of the mayor down there, and fortunately, it was successful. Well, maybe unfortunately, it was successful. You see, the recall of the mayor, because it has never been done in the city of Benton Harbor on that level. You see, and we did it with the absentee ballot. So they claimed at that time that I was in possession now of an absentee ballot. Only in possession. I didn't alter it. I didn't do anything. I was in possession, which was not true. But unfortunately, in the city of Benton Harbor, racism is something that you know is so outspoken. It's done right in front of your face that you never know what's happened. So anyway, they found me guilty and they gave me 5 years probation. I wrote an article in the People Tribune newspaper, quoting Deuteronomy 28, starting with the 14th verse. And it simply said, if you do not hearken to the Lord thy God, all these things will come upon you. And the judge said that it was a threat on his life, his wife's life, his children's life, everybody's life. He said it was a threat on their life. This is what he said. And unfortunately, that wasn't my intent, but they got away with it. They sent me to prison for 3 years. I had to do a year before I received a appeal bond, and it was overturned. So that's one. Now, let me go back and talk just recently in 2014. Once again, I did a recall of the mayor down there. And what happened, before we can get to where we can actually vote, they decided that they charged me with forgery on a recall petition. And there was no such charge, which I knew. I was telling, I said, there's no such charge as forgery on a recall petition in the state of Michigan. There's no such charge. The only thing, if the signatures don't match, all you do is cross it out. And my attorney, I had a great attorney. He was good, but you know, Harvard man, but he believed what white, he's a white guy. He believed white folks, you know. So they convicted me and gave me 3 years in prison. And I did the whole 3 years, 30 months. No, I'm sorry, I did 30 months in prison. And it was eventually overturned by the Supreme Court, stating the same words I said back in 2014, that there was no such charge as forgery on a recall petition. So I won that. We're in civil court now on the Supreme Court level, and we're requesting $5.4 million. And we're in good shape. But we'll see what happens. But they don't want to see no black man get rich. They're going to do everything in their power not to do it. So anyway, let me get to the water because I don't want to take up too much of your time. One of the things how we all got started in the city of Benton Harbor was that my good friend Emma Kennard, she's a member of the Benton Harbor Community Water Council. Her daughter came from Texas to help her out and take a bath. She tried to take a bath and she saw the color of the water. The water was like gold with little particles in it. So she called me. I told her to get 2 quarts of that water and take it to the mayor. And the mayor, we don't have a mayor like Jackson, Mississippi, someone who's going to come out and help the people. This guy is so pro white folks say he don't know what to do. You know, you don't know who he is. Matter of fact, he's such a well, anyway, let me say this. By taking it to the city council, he did nothing. So she brought it back to me. I sent it out to the University of Michigan biological lab and had it analyzed. And it came back with over 300 parts per billion of lead in her water. So then we formed the Benton Harbor Community Water Council. From there, we worked with the water plant to try to get that water straightened out. And we couldn't. We had lead as high as 800 parts per billion of lead, which is 15 is the action level. Then we had 600 parts per billion of lead, which is 15 is the action level was getting informed. We had all kinds of stuff and nothing was being done. Nothing. Nobody really cared. People were telling people the water was good to drink, the elected official, knowing that the water was not good to drink. They knew it wasn't good to drink, but yet you had a mayor telling people the water was safe to drink and they knew it wasn't. So here's what we did. We got a group together. Now, Yura is part of my group. We decided that we was going to file a petition with the EPA. And on September the 9th, 2021, we filed that petition. And that petition got everything moving like never before. That's a bad mother. When you file that petition, it changes everything. That is one of the things I will advise the city of Jackson to file a petition. And you can go on my website, that's bhcwc2.org, and read the petition that we filed. It was such a devastating thing on September 9th of 2021 that it got every single person moving. Everybody was moving. Everybody was moving to try. We talking about the EPA, we talking about the governor, we talking about local government. Everybody now was trying to do something to head us off. The governor on September 8th, she got wind that we was filing this petition on September 9th, and she dedicated $10 million to the city of Benton Harbor. And the wheels start turning. Everybody want to know. We got international coverage. We got the Guardian newspaper writing over there in London. We got, everybody was writing about this because we called the press conference. Everything we was doing at this time, which I'm a lot more aggressive than my team is. And I'm willing to take the hit. That's the difference between me and most people. If the people in Jackson is actually going to get something done, they gotta have someone out there who's willing to take a hit, because they coming after you. They're gonna do everything in their power to discredit you if they can. So what we need to do is make sure that we got somebody down there who's willing to speak up and tell them, we're not gonna take this mess no more. You're gonna clean this water up. And in the first place, think about filing that lawsuit. But here's what we do here now. We deliver water door to door. That's what we do. Every single citizen in the city of Benton Harbor, we go door to door, because I don't think a person should have to stand in line. I don't think the victim, which I think the residents of Jackson is victims, I don't believe that they should stand in line. And I think that's where we at. We should never, ever, ever allow the big, like, they want to criminalize the people because they didn't get the pipe. Right now, we got 90% of the pipes, the lead pipes removed. And that's because the work of the Benton Harbor Community Council, because they know me. They know that I would probably say anything. Anything would come out of my mouth. I mean, but it's going to be the right thing. You see, it's going to be the right thing. It ain't going to be, I don't have no other motive than to make sure the resident of Benton Harbor clean, safe water. That's it. I don't care about money. I don't care about nothing. I can't be bought. I can't be sold. And they know that. So they know if I do something, I'm willing to back it up. And I say this to you in Jackson, Mississippi. You have to be more aggressive. You can't sit back there and expect them to do something for you, because they're not going to do it. And if they do, they're going to chip at it. But file you that petition and get out there and make sure that they do what they're supposed to do. And don't rely on just thinking black folks gonna do what's right. Don't do it, because they're not gonna do what's right unless you force them. If you can't force them, you can't take it, you're not gonna get nothing. And they know that I'm no picnic in the park.
Thank you, Reverend Pinckney. And
All right.
I love the fact that Reverend Pinckney said he'll say anything, but it'll be right, whatever, you know. And one of the things that Rukia and others talked about, that they are having a demonstration on Monday, both to support the people at the local level, but to continue to raise it at the national level. I'm going to do something here. I'm going to move from Benton Harbor to Lagos, Nigeria, and I'm going to ask my sister Ranke, because I want to connect us, if we can, nationally and internationally, to talk about the struggles that are happening in Lagos in their efforts to prevent the privatization of water, but also to make sure that water is a human right. So I want to welcome from Lagos, where it must be 8 o'clock at night. You know, so I want to welcome you here. And I want you to tell us a little bit about CAPA, the organization that you represent. So would you all welcome my sister, Iranke.
Thank you so much, Baba Akili. Thank you very much, brothers, sisters, Reverend Pinckney. Thank you so much for those inspiring, powerful words. And of course, every speaker before me. It's 8 p.m. in Lagos, but I'm so inspired and happy to be here because all of the stories I've been listening to, also what is currently going on in Jackson, what we saw before in Flint, and, you know, just Mississippi, everything going on right now. Also, kind of reinforces the fact that whatever calculated oppression is going on is not limited to a space. We are seeing a new form of colonization. We are seeing modern colonialism. Racism itself is not right now only residing in the US, but this same corporate oppressors have found a way to also export that modern racism. And that's what I'm going to briefly talk about regarding what is happening in Nigeria, in Lagos, in Nigeria, and then the rest of Africa. So the organization I work with is called Corporate Accountability and Public Participation Africa. We work in partnership with Corporate Accountability, which is Baba Akili's organization. We call him Baba Akili. In Yoruba, in Nigeria, Baba is father. So when you look at the struggles and the organizing that we have been doing, Baba Akili has been really, really so much of an inspiration. So of course, we can't call him anything else but Baba. So thank you so much for having me tonight. So CAPA, one of the things we do at CAPA, which is the acronym for my organization, is that we challenge corporate abuses of our natural resources. And that's why every speaker has said before me resonated so well. You know, Reverend was talking about how you can't be bought, you can't be sold, and then you have to be really courageous and brave in all of these struggles. I think that's what we have epitomized, you know, over the years. So in 2014, this movement was born, and it's called Our Water, Our Right movement. But what led to it was really significant, and it's something that if we hadn't been keen or careful enough, we could have missed out on. So it was an attempt to privatize our water in Lagos State. But little did people know also that as that attempt was going on in Lagos, it was also being channeled all across Africa. So of course, one of my sisters earlier mentioned Veolia. Veolia is always a culprit. You know, when things are going wrong, just look around, you find some of these guys, you find Suez, you find Veolia, find Metito, Abengwa, you know, all of them. And then there was this huge attempt to walk into our space. You know, as usual, we know what they are right now. They are just, they are people who like to reap where they did not sow. But now we are so conscious, and that's the reason when they move, before they move right, we are there waiting for them. Like we know all of these gimmicks and tactics, and then we are up to the task because we are talking about people. We are talking about water as a human right. So it's no longer water as just an economic resource, which they like to think. So what happened in 2014 was an attempt to privatize Lagos water. And then, you know, there was all of this charade and lies being told about how once privatization is done, you know, everybody will be able to have access, all of the problems, you know, of access to water or affordability or availability would be solved. And then we knew that was a huge lie. When you look at Suez or even France, where these guys usually come from. Their headquarters is in France. The same Suez was kicked out of France. So if it was all rosy, if it's they are the angels that they pretend to be, why would your own country kick you out and then, you know, just remunicipalize? You know, so those were some of the findings that we did. And then we presented it to the government to say, look, don't be carried away. Don't be bamboozled by these guys. This is just an exported form of colonialism and racism that we are seeing here on the soil in Africa. So we swung into action. Unfortunately, also sometimes, you know, you find bad eggs in government who are willing to, unlike Reverend, be bought and be sold, you know. So they are always for sale to the highest bidder. But we, the people, were not going to let that happen. And as I said earlier, we realized also that it was a fight bigger than my organization. We didn't pretend to be the messiah of the people. We decided that it was a struggle for the people to take on and take a leading role in. So that's what we did. We started to organize, and that's how our Water, Our Right was born. And this is a movement that has the people at the center, communities, people who you ordinarily would think, oh, they don't understand what is going on, probably because they don't have formal education, or they're in poor communities or rural communities and so on. But we decided that these people are actually the champions. So the people were at the center of the struggle. And then we did something that was really unique. The movement combined efforts of civil society activists and labor unions. You know, it was really one of a kind. The last time we had that sort of arrangement in the Nigerian history was when we struggled together against the oppressive military regime. That was in the 90s, 1999 to be precise. That was when you found labor and civil society coming together to, you know, just challenge an oppressive system. So we decided that it was time again to replicate that, this time around with water struggle. Because we cannot continue. Now we are surrounded by water. There's none to drink. There's a calculated attempt, a deliberate attempt to kill public water, to pretend that government cannot take care of its resources, to pretend that the public sector cannot do justice when it comes to water. Oh, there's no money, there's no infrastructure and all of that. And then they go cap in hand to this so-called messiahs, who we have now seen for what they really are, demons actually, as a matter of fact, you know, daylight demons. We are seeing what they are. So, you know, that was happening. But then when we began to organize, it became obvious that this is serious business. And then government did not have a choice. They had to dialogue. They had to say, okay, so what do you want? Now you are the leaders of the people. And that was where we corrected the government also to say, no, we are not the leaders of the people. The people are leading. So we are privileged and grateful to be able to organize that movement. So it was really hard and tough to privatize Lagos Water. So that's where we were. We kept pushing back. We kept resisting, and that resistance had to be sustained. So as I said, we collaborated with the labor unions, with the civil society, with communities. And another fantastic thing that we decided to do, you know how when mischief is about to be done, they tell you, oh, women have some cultural roles which are different from political roles, we told them, no, a citizen is a citizen. It really doesn't matter your gender. You can't, this oppression cannot continue, oppression based on the basis of gender or class. So what we did, this movement also gave birth to a unique angle to it, which was the women's movement. So that one is called the Africa Women Water, Sanitation and Hygiene Network, AWASHNet. You should see how women were and still are leading the struggles, you know, speaking really vocally and courageously, speaking truth to justice. And that also became like a really dynamic and selling point of our campaign, because once you see women leading, you really don't have a choice. You listen. So sometimes when we go into the government quarters, things that they had been deaf about, suddenly they see this organized group of women just coming at them. So they have been listening. So I think I'll just move quickly to talk about what that movement has now given birth to. So I would not say, to be honest, that we have achieved total success, because, you know, there's always the attempt. These guys, they live on profit. They thrive on profit. They milk the people. And we have very vulnerable communities who ordinarily cannot even afford what these guys will be billing them eventually. So we don't even want to risk it. We don't want to have them at all. So what we have been doing is an expose. We go to do researches, and this is where Baba Akili's organization also comes in, and some of our other international partners. We look at failures of privatizers, of corporations all across the world, including the unique story of Flint. You know, this has been an advocacy tool for us to say, look at what happened in Flint. Look at what has happened in other countries where privatization has been sold as though it was going to solve the problem of the people. But see the disaster that became of these corporate guys. You know, so we did all of those materials into publications, into books, and so on. Some of them we use as sensitization materials for communities so that they can keep leading their own struggles. And then the rest of them, we use them as advocacy materials for government officials to understand that these guys are just oppressors and colonizers in suits and shiny ties. You know, that's all that they are. So that has happened, and so far we are sustaining that movement. The brilliant part now is that we have also upscaled this struggle and resistance to other African countries. So I can safely say right now that this movement has also been born in Ghana. Ghana also, where they fell into the trap of privatization. So it did happen, but good for Ghana also. Ghana experienced privatization at its worst. You know, it was a disaster. So Ghana deprivatized. So it's really alive in Ghana. We have our water rights also in Cameroon. In Gabon, we are there now. Senegal, Kenya, Uganda, Mozambique. You know, these are some of the African countries where we have also upscaled the struggle to say, look, if we could do it in Lagos, we can do it on the continent of Africa. And then it's high time. You know, these guys have to be bounced back to wherever they came from, because Africa is not a dumping ground. So I'm just really, I'm inspired to know that in spite of this calculated attempt to always subjugate and oppress Black communities, either Black communities in the US or in the diaspora, or even on the soil of Africa, I feel sometimes I feel like these guys are so audacious. And that's the reason we have to be even more audacious, because how dare you? How dare you leave your land and then come to the soil of Africa to try to perpetrate the same evil, the same subjugation that you have subjected our brothers and sisters to in the US? You want to do it in Africa? No way. So we are the principality that are equipped to give them a tough time, you know, on the soil of Africa. And we will keep doing that, especially with your support, with this solidarity and these kind of inspiring stories that we keep hearing across the world. Thank you so much. I hope I've not overshot my time. I tend to talk a lot. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ranke. And one of the things I want to come back to Mississippi. I want to come back to Rukia because I want to uplift the Mississippi Rapid, but I want to thank you, and I want to just alert people to October 10th, where there will be a national week of action in Africa around the human right to water. Rukia, I want to come back to you and have you talk about what's happening Monday, and also you know, what we can do, what those of us in LA can do, those of us in Delaware can do, those of us in other parts of the country who are on this call. And then I want to call on one of my co-workers to talk about what we have done. So first, Rukia, tell us about what we can do to support what the people in Jackson can do.
Well, one, continue to talk about it. We don't want this to die down, not in your households, not on the media.
We may have frozen there for a minute. Rukia?
If you're still with us, it might help to cut off your video.
Yeah. Rukia? Yeah, she's frozen.
You can sign up. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, you were frozen for a minute. So kind of recap again.
Okay, so sorry. Well, I was saying, you know, can y'all hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. That folks can definitely support us by going to JXNpeoplesAssembly.org, sign up to volunteer. or to donate and to stay abreast of what's happening. You can find the same information. I hope I'm not breaking up now. The same information at Mississippi Rapid Response Coalition. That's msrrc.org. You can donate. You can sign up to even from afar to help us get these wellness checks done. There's so much folks can do.
And it looks like we froze again.
Your localities. We need to be real partners and allies.
Thank you.
I might be breaking up again, so I'm gonna.
All right, I'm gonna
turn it over.
All right, is Nisma? Are you still here?
Yes, I'm still on the call.
Yes, Nisma is a co-worker of mine at Corporate Accountability, where I'm a project coordinator, and one of the issues I work on is one of water. Nisma, I want you to share what Corporate Accountability through our Black Collective and our water team has done to support the people in Jackson.
Yes.
Yourself.
Okay, thank you, Akili. My name is Nisma Gabobe. I'm a researcher at Corporate Accountability. I work with Akili on our water team, where we focus on challenging privatization of water systems in the US and in Africa with our partners at CAPA, and advancing public solutions to ensure that everyone has access to clean and affordable drinking water through publicly controlled systems. And we also, Akili and I, work together on our Black Collective team, which is particularly focused on exposing how corporate abuses impact Black communities in particular in the US. And so thank you for inviting us to join today's call, and for the chance to hear directly from folks in Mississippi about your experiences and the history of how Jackson got to this point. And I think the threads that are being pulled together around what's happened in Jackson, in Flint, in Benton Harbor, in Lagos. And I also want to share that Corporate Accountability will be making a donation to this Action for Jackson fundraiser. We'll be donating $2,000, and really just want to share that we at Corporate Accountability stand in solidarity with the people of Jackson during this crisis, which we know has been decades in the making. We believe that access to clean drinking water is a fundamental human right. And we've seen how in recent years, there's been crisis after crisis across the country, particularly in communities of color, as residents have dealt with water contaminants like lead and E. coli and unaffordable rates, punitive shutoff policies. And this is, due to decades of disinvestment in our water systems, as folks have been saying, going back to the 80s, when the federal government drastically reduced spending on national water infrastructure, leaving our communities without the resources we need to make a lot of the critical upgrades that we need to manage our infrastructure. And I just also wanted to point to, how this has left a vacuum, as I think Rukia was alluding to, where private water corporations have presented themselves as a solution for cash-strapped cities that need, major water infrastructure investments. But water privatization contracts, which, can range from the full-scale private ownership of water systems to public-private partnerships in the form of management or maintenance contracts. These can often lead to rate hikes and cost-cutting measures that endanger public health and labor cuts, all in the interest of maximizing profits for private water companies. And as I understand, Jackson has seen this play out also before in its contract with Siemens, where the residents of Jackson bore the cost of fixing the issues bore the cost of the exorbitantly high water bills that came from the malfunctioning water meters. And the city ultimately bore the cost of fixing the issues that the company brought on, along with the financial burden that the city took to enter the contract in the first place. And just wanted to highlight that these tactics come straight out of the private water industry's playbook. And as folks have talked about, this left communities like Flint and also Pittsburgh and Bayonne and other communities across the US and across the globe, to deal with the fallout of their negligence. All while the corporation continues to put its profits over the communities that they exploit. And so I just wanted to highlight that as local and state officials have called for various forms of privatization during the crisis, we want to encourage folks in Jackson to look at how the scope of privatization contracts have played out in other cities. And if anyone would like to talk about how to stop privatization in their communities, including in Jackson, please reach out to Akili or I, and we're more than happy to talk or, share any resources that we have.
And thank you for that, Nisma. And one of the things that we do want to do, and we appreciate Corporate Accountability's contribution, and we hope that it helps. But there's a couple of things that Rukia talked about. One is that we have to talk about this. We have to tell people about what's happening in Jackson, not by the negative or the problem, but that what this problem came from. And Rukia, I'm going to come back to you and once again ask you if you would remind us about where this problem started, how it continues, and what you all are doing on the ground to deal with it. So where it started, why does it continue, and what you all are doing.
Thanks, Baba Keely. And I'm not sure, can you all hear me or am I frozen?
You're good.
Okay, great. All right. It started decades ago. We saw, it started because we have an old, rare water system. I'm trying to be as brief as possible because I know people got to try to remember what I'm saying. So we got an old, rare water system. We have barely any federal and state funding to help maintain this water system. The entire maintenance of the water system has been rendered by the financial burdens placed on the residents, the backs of residents of Jackson, and the administration, the municipal administration. That's what we have. That's what we've seen. It's only been the residents, as Makani has often said, that have been the heroes of this, who have even agreed to tax themselves to fix this poor water infrastructure that we have. We have aging pipes, lead pipes, pipes that need to be replaced, as we've seen in other places across the nation. And so what we see is an ongoing issue that has reached its breaking point, has reached a point where a Band-Aid is not going to fix it. We need federal and state dollars to be placed in Jackson to fix this water system, to fix not only the pipes, but also the plant itself. We must have it. In the interim, we need water filters, NFS 53 water filters. We need those so that people in their homes can begin to drink water safely. We also need folks to donate water testing kits. We are looking to be our own water technicians to ensure that we have some sustainability ourselves. We want to make sure that we're drinking clean water. Most importantly, we need pressure on the state governor and on the federal government. We need to see a return of power to the people, to the municipalities, to control their own resources, including water. As we saw before Reagan, we need that cost sharing agreement. We need to have the right and control over our water system and the finances and funding that goes to it. We need to bypass the state, and we need your pressure to do that. We need you to talk about it. Finally, on Monday, if you are near Jackson or in Jackson, we want you to come out on September 26th, Monday, September 26th, we will march on Jackson about this water crisis. We will be marching with the Poor People's Campaign and the Mississippi Rapid Response Coalition, and a number of organizations and churches and faith-based institutions that are coming out in droves to say, we demand the right to our water, we demand that it stays public, we demand that it's clean, and we demand that we no longer have to pay for it. And so we wanna make sure that everybody gets that message, and so appreciate your time. Go to Mississippi Rapid Response Coalition if you would like to volunteer or donate. That's msrrc.org, or you can follow us at Jackson People's Assembly. That's JXN Peoples with an S Assembly.org.
Thank you, Rukia. And Makani, I'm going to come back to you. And I'm going to find out if we have any questions that people want to share or ask. And then we're going to wrap up and excuse me, and acknowledge our supporters. So Makani, we're coming back around to you. By the way, we've been around the world. So Makani, we're coming back to you.
I don't think there's anything else there is to say. I mean, I think it's been said, you know, we're here, all of us together in this issue. I believe, as many of us have been trained, that the people united will never be defeated eventually. I know that's not part of the chat, but you know. And I think, and I'm so grateful for the space that you guys pulled together so that we can continue to plot, because you know, this is happening to everybody in so many places, and we're here at, you know, Mississippi, you know, Michigan, and all the, you know, Nigeria, Ghana, all of us all over. So, you know, how can they stop us when we come together? So I feel like, yay, and that's a great birthday present. So appreciate you.
Well, thank you so much. Let me very quickly, any questions or comments people want to make, and then we're going to acknowledge our co-sponsors, and then we want to wrap up. And I know that there's some Rukia, great. Thank you for putting that in the chat. You see in the chat the follow-up. I see we got 2 hands raised. We got, oh, Mary Alice. Oh, and my good friend Jeffrey. So Mary Alice, we're going to Benton Harbor, and then we're coming to Delaware. Mary Alice.
Thank you, Baba Keely, and thank you all, and thank you for this space. I just want everybody in their prospective places to check on your state revenue shares, because there was some funding coming down from the federal government anyway for infrastructural things, and they're trying to stop Benton Harbor from getting the 17 million that we applied for before we went into a state of emergency. And we want those dollars, and it seems like our elected officials and those that are over management and planning economic development is allowing this to happen, but the fight is just starting. We want those fundings as well. The governor tried to make it seem as though, you know, that she did this, you know, since this emergency came up with, you know, 10 million here and the federal government sending more, and it all turned out to be, I think, like 45 million. We already know that America is falling apart, and we want our fair share of rightful human right of fresh drinking water.
Thank you, Mary Alice. And I get to, for a couple of weeks, for a number of months, I followed up with Mary Alice because she is onboarding, because one of the other things I do is I'm an organizer with Black Lives Matter, and Benton Harbor is becoming a chapter. Jeffrey in Delaware. Good to see you, Jeffrey. Jeffrey and I and Makani, almost what, 30 years, Jeffrey?
Yes. No,
at
wow.
least that long, yeah. So welcome, Jeffrey. And you're in Wilmington, aren't you?
Wilmington, Delaware.
Yes, go ahead.
Hey, thank you so much. This has been overwhelming, inspiring. Veolia, they're active in Newcastle, Delaware, which is where Wilmington is, which is also a majority Black city, about 57%. We have a massive problem with the port, one of the largest projects in the state. They just made a decision yesterday where they actually decided to just move the project forward, although there's going to be dioxins and PCBs and stuff in the water. It's going to lead to massive levels of emissions. So we share with you in this, and I will spread the word here. We'll get it through something called the Delaware Community Benefits Agreement Coalition, our group, to work in solidarity with you. Makini has been a great guide, leader, organizing, trainer for me from way back, and anything that we can do. And I also teach at the university to get students, I'm in Africana Studies, to get Africana Studies departments involved in this and other groups across the country. I think at least we can get the word out. And I know we can start with the University of Delaware's campus and the communities that we're working in now. So thank you so much for your struggle. Are you going to record this? Because I think students— It is recorded. Tremendous, because I think this would be a tremendous educational tool for students. Thank you all for your tremendous work. Jackson, Mississippi, we are in solidarity with you and all the other places here around the globe. Thank you for this opportunity, and thank you for all of your great work. Really, this is a blessing, and forward.
It's good to see you, Jeffrey.
Yes, brother, always.
Anybody in here, comments or questions? Y'all good? All right. Well, thank you all. I'm going to ask my sister Vernine Mincy if she would come on and recognize our co-sponsors. But before we do that, I want to thank all of you for joining us. Rukia, thank you so much. It's always good to see you. My dear friend and colleague and co-worker and just downright buddy, Makani, whose birthday it is today and took time out. I mean, she's celebrating her birthday, but she said, okay, brother, I'll do it for you, but don't ask me again. I want to thank you. And I want to thank all of you from around the world, Reverend Pinckney, Iranke, and Naira for joining us and telling us the story, to make sure that we make these connections, to make sure that we remember where we are. And because we are coming from Mississippi, the home of Mrs. Fannie Lou Hamer, this is even more important to us and more critical to us. So Vernine, would you come and thank all of our co-sponsors?
All right, thank you very much. I'd like to take the time to thank the co-sponsors for this program today, for Action for Jackson, the Africatown Coalition, the Baptist Ministers Conference of Los Angeles and Southern California, the Black Community Clergy and Labor Alliance, Black Lives Matter Grassroots, Black Lives Matter of Los Angeles, the Liberty Ecosystem, Sanctuary of Hope, and SCLC of Southern California. We just want to thank all of our partners and PAF, also the Pan-African Film Festival. We want to thank all of our partners for uplifting this message, a very important message, and we can see it is a global issue that we need to be paying close attention to so that we can elevate the voices that have been heard today in order to solve these issues. Because as a people, when we focus on, we end up winning, and we have to keep that in mind. Okay, so thank you very much.
Thank you, Vernine. And on behalf of the Fannie Lou Hamer Institute, and I think that this is in the vein, this is in the work that Mrs. Hamer would be doing, and this is why there is a Fannie Lou Hamer Institute, so that one, we can uplift her name, but also uplift the struggles of the people. And so with that, I'm going to thank all of you who have joined us. I'm going to ask that we close out with Mrs. Hamer, just like we opened with Mrs. Hamer. But one of the things that we want to make sure you know, that Mrs. Hamer was an activist, a leader, but she was also a singer. She also performed spirituals. And so we're going to ask now for Mrs. Hamer to come back on and take us out. It's still life mine. I'm gonna